Hello, this is Dr. Harriet Fraad bringing you Capitalism Hits Home, a podcast from Democracy at Work. Today, I want to talk about the relationship between sociopathic behavior, that's behavior that is a diseased adjustment where one doesn't care about other people or society, but just oneself. It's an ultimate narcissism. And I want to look at that sociopathological mental illness and capitalism and what their relationship is. The reason that capitalism breeds the mental illness that's sociopathic is that every capitalist has to know, in order to be a successful capitalist, that the way to make money is to pay out the least possible and get the most for yourself. And so, everyone unconsciously, if not consciously, knows that you can't work for other people and get all that you earn for those people. They have to earn more to pay you. Otherwise, they wouldn't hire you if they didn't make more money off you than they get from your labor. Everyone kind of unconsciously knows that, but that's the way capitalist business survives. You pay out the least and you take in the most for yourself and your stockholders. Now, how do they do that? How do they manage? Well, they have to cut costs. One cost they often cut is labor. They don't pay as much because what you pay depends on the social demand. You're not going to offer so little that nobody would work for you, and you try to keep it down as much as possible while keeping people to work for you. You can also make more by eliminating employee benefits like health care, paid days off, vacation days. You can also save money with machines. You can replace workers with machines, and although machines are often expensive, they don't get sick days, they don't take days off. If they break, a mechanic can fix them, and the mechanic can check them at night to make sure they function the next day. And so that's a cost saving over time, even if you have to invest in a machine. Also, of course, they don't go on strike, the machines. Another way is through getting cheaper raw materials. So you don't have to pay as much. An example is Starbucks. Starbucks tried to cut their workers' pay, but people went on strike. So they really did not get away with that. So, since they couldn't have machines serve the coffee that they provide, they looked for cheaper raw materials. They found cheaper coffee produced in Ghana by child labor and slave labor. They got cheaper sugar from Honduras, from forced labor and child labor. That's where they got cocoa as well. And so that they could cut costs for all those products. And their compassion for the workers who provided for them, the enslaved people, the children, did not carry them away from those products. They were making money. Of course, it isn't Starbucks alone who benefit from cheap goods from forced labor or child labor. Those plantations are profitable because they have customers. And service industries work the same way. For example, some of the most badly paid workers in the United States are care workers who are home health care workers, who go to people's homes because they're old or sick who do all the things to take care of them and help them with their medications. Their median salary is $33,000. The employers who employ them have a median salary of $250,000 to $300,000. That's quite a difference. And the difference is because they're paying as little as they can. They often get undocumented labor. They certainly get people who are less educated or whose degrees are not acknowledged. And they get minority labor to work for little. And they're not bleeding for those workers and thinking, oh my God, how can you live on what I pay? These women often have children. How can they manage? They don't bother with that. Their empathy is destroyed by their greed because capitalism thrives by giving the worker and paying less for raw materials, no matter who produces them or how they're produced. People who do that feel good. They feel they succeeded. They won in capitalist terms. Now, you may contest that. You may say, well, they're not only a company like Starbucks or all these other companies aren't just earning money for themselves, but for their stockholders, which are a majority of Americans. Nope, not true. 10% of Americans own 93% of the stocks sold in the United States. So that doesn't really work. So back to the idea of how capitalism breeds the mental illness of sociopathic illness. Now, if success is defined by wealth, one can feel very successful by having wealth, even though a person didn't earn it. For example, Trump got his start with $214 million from his daddy. Musk got his start from his billionaire father who owns emerald mines. These are people who start out with wealth and define themselves as superior because they have wealth which buys things like elections in the United States. They're not worried about how they treat ordinary people. Another reason they're not is that's how they grew up. Trump grew up with multiple servants. So did Musk. Musk lived in South Africa, and as a child, South Africa, before apartheid, where there were there still are huge discrepancies in wealth in South Africa because they had a revolution in terms of race, but not in terms of income. And therefore, he grew up with multiple servants. So that's the way it ought to be. And that's the way it naturally is for him. There was a scene that I saw once at a pool in South Africa where a little child, maybe 5 years old, wanted to be moved in the pool. He wanted to go from an area that was in the shade to an area that was now more sunny. So he snapped his fingers and said, "Bearer." And the bearer, the man, came over and put him in the area he wanted to be. That child won't think it's unusual to have servants around who pick you up and put you down somewhere else. And he won't feel, what is it like to have to pick up some spoiled brat and move him? What about me? What do I bring home to my own child? That kind of thinking is not present for these people. And that is a mental illness because mental health is all about connection. And they are disconnected from the people around them who meet their needs, unacknowledged and poorly paid. They're not worried about enriching themselves. by impoverishing other people, because that's capitalism. And you're successful in capitalism when you take more and you give less. It rewards those who have money, no matter who it's taken from. Look at Trump. He's notorious for not paying the workers that work for him. He signs a contract. Then, when the contract is finished and the workers are finished, he argues and says they didn't do the work properly. And when the contractor says, yes, they did it exactly according to specifications, he takes it to court, counting on that the other people don't have the money to outlast him in court and settle for half of what they should be paid because they did the labor. Elon Musk is heading the new ostensible Department of Governmental Efficiency. But he's not the only billionaire. Who are our leaders? People Americans are trained to look up to. Billionaires run not only the Department of Governmental Efficiency, but the Department of Commerce, the Department of the Interior, the Education Department, NASA, and the Small Business Administration, as well as key ambassadorial posts. Because it's fun to be the ambassador, let's say, to France, where you live in Paris in a gorgeous mansion. They couldn't have acquired their billions or held on to them if they thought, really, I ought to share. I have more than I need. I want to help. I feel for these people who are running around working for me. Half of American households have less than $8,000 in savings. How long can one live on that? Not very long. Billionaires like Musk and Peter Thiel, co-owner of PayPal and other businesses, and their families have multiple servants and wild wealth, enough to buy governments. They don't waste any time feeling for the people around them. Not at all. Whereas other people really suffer. Recently, there was a case of a woman named Tatiana Williams. She lived in an apartment. The landlord raised the rent as they are allowed to do. She had 2 children. She went to every governmental agency she could in Detroit where she lived. They turned her down for shelter. She went to the shelters of Detroit. They were full. She had a van, her one possession, so she took her kids to a garage where they would be safe in their van and sleep. The 2-year-old and 9-year-old froze to death because the van got very cold. But the people who are in charge of benefits for housing or adjusting rents really are not concerned. They're making money, so they're a success. That is really mentally ill. Mental health is built on connection. And so that they're sick people. They're sociopaths, but they're considered heroes of our capitalist America. Well, what can we do about it? Well, we can do a lot about it. And for the first time in about 75 years, Americans are activated to do something about it. One thing people can do is demonstrate against these things. There are Tesla takedowns every Saturday in New York City. I went to one this past Saturday. There were 1,500 people there. Not that I counted every one, but there seemed to be about 500. And then a march of 1,000 people came and joined. No one went in to buy a Tesla. And although Musk is the richest man in the world and didn't personally suffer, he did notice that his wealth on the Tesla car went down by half. went down so much that Trump himself is hawking Teslas in his talks and on the media. People all over New York are not buying Teslas, and all over Massachusetts too. And people are demonstrating everywhere. Recently in Western Massachusetts, there was a big demonstration of farmers because they were offered government loans for making ecological changes on their farms, using solar power, using wind power, using those things to irrigate and to pay for their barns and so on. And Trump cut them all off. So there was a tractor rally in Western Massachusetts where hundreds of farmers drove their tractors together to protest. That sort of thing hasn't been happening for a long time. But it's a testimony to the fact that people are getting active as we have to be, because we are the majority that keep things running. The bosses are few. The billionaires are few. The people who do the work of making America run are many. And so that if we get in the street and show that we're opposed, it matters. The Republicans have canceled all their town halls, whether in Iowa, Nebraska, or anywhere else, because people come and scream. Because some of those Republicans voted for Trump because they wanted change, but they didn't imagine they'd be cut and hurt, and they are, and they're furious. They didn't care if other groups were hurt, but now they're hurt, and they're very angry. Bernie Sanders and AOC, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, are touring this country, speaking to an enormous number of people. They had a bigger rally than any of the candidates for the past presidential election. 34,000 people came to hear them at their last stop because people are looking for an alternative. Another thing that we can do to make this government serve us instead of the billionaires, and quite tangentially, to save those billionaires from being mentally ill sociopaths, is to work for socialism here and work for an economic system based on cooperatives, where people run the businesses, decide what to produce, how to produce it, and what to do with the profits. And they do it democratically. In 2008, I went to a city of co-ops called Mondragon in Spain. The minute you walk in, you feel different. There's no cops. Things are very calm. And I went to a big factory that produces washing machines and refrigerators, the Frigor company, and saw a group of workers putting parts into dishwashers. And I asked, I asked a woman what the noise was about because there was a big buzzer. And the buzzer came off because every 2 hours, people have to change their routine job because it's not healthy to do the same thing all day. And between changing jobs and walking to another job, they got a break. I asked how things work here because I had heard that they had to cut back on this factory because of the worldwide recession. And this is a Spanish factory, and people were buying more washing machines in the expanding vacation homes on the Spanish shore. And the woman said, it has hit us here. We have had meetings of what we're going to do about it. We had a choice. We could either dismiss people, and when you're dismissed from one co-op out of the 104 co-ops that exist in Mondragon, you get a job at a different one. Or we could decide we will work a 4-day week instead of a 5-day week. So No one has to leave, and we'll all have more time but less money. We decided that. And I said, well, how did you feel about that decision? She said, the situation wasn't optimal, but it was my decision. And in Mondragon, the leaders are elected. They can be impeached if people want to. Every 2 years, more are elected. And the people at the very top, the overriding managers, can never make more than 6 to 8 times more than the average worker in the plant. That makes sense. We could work for that, and we could work for socialism. So we don't have to live in this world where sociopaths, sick people who feel no empathy, are our leaders. And we deserve that. Thank you.